the issue that I had for a long time coaching, because that was the way I was coached in high school and college, was we were trying to coach, or we were trying to chase everything. And, we had to do conditioning at the end because, whatever we did in practice, even though we were go in practice, if we didn't condition at the end, then we weren't going to be ready for Friday night. And the opposite was actually true, but it took somebody like Tony to go out there and start telling us all we were wrong. And then once you start thinking about it and taking the dive and with both feet in, and you start seeing how your kids respond and how much better you're playing and how much even more physical they're able to play because of their, the aerobic work that you've done, that it's, you'll never go back. So if you have issues about it, I've never had a coach who is, and I've had hundreds respond back to me after they played over the last couple of years and say, wow, what a dumbass I was. And how bad did I treat my athletes for so long? And I'm in the same boat. I feel like I should call up my first 8 teams, and one of those was my brother-in-law. And we were 9-0, but we got beat in the second round because we were all beat up, and we played a good 3A team, and we were Ironman football, and they beat us on a last second play in overtime, and that was it. And I wish I had that team back, because we would have subbed more and we would have had more guys, and I think we would have made a run to state championship. But you got to kind of go through that sometimes to figure this stuff out.
And one of the things I think I forgot there, Brad, that just popped in my head, it's really hard to measure what happens, how much better a practice is when kids look forward to it. I never looked forward to a practice, and I was a coach's kid. I loved football. I never looked forward to a practice. I did practice because I want to eventually play in the games. And I believe if I would have looked forward to practice, and I would have come to practice with a bounce in my step because they didn't destroy me, crush my soul the day before, that I would have been a much better athlete. And so that cumulative effect of focusing on speed and power, but also really developing this mental attitude of enthusiasm, not just towards games, but towards practice, is really important.
All right. I'm going to get started back in here with piggybacking on some of the things that Tony said, and or some things that he's going to continue to talk about. One of the biggest questions I get is, how do you know your guys are going to be ready for the fourth quarter? And Tony talked about some of that. So I want to go through some of the things that traditionally we've done, and then some different ways that maybe you can think of it. Something that I haven't talked a lot about. Like I said, I try to put stuff in here that I haven't talked a lot about, that hopefully you can get some new things out of. But, here's things that we traditionally did in conditioning. I did gassers. I was on teams where, I ran my first gasser my freshman year and then faked a back injury so I could set out the next one, and then gutted it back out to run the third one. I had our guys doing gassers a lot. We never got into a lot of 110s or 300-yard shuttles. I had to run a 300-yard shuttle my first day at Knox College in football. But we used to run Steeler miles on Monday, which is just a big lap around the field. And the coaches sit on each corner to make sure the guys don't cut corners. Your fast guys jog fast enough. Your slow guys walk. Everyone bitches that they're not going hard enough, and the coaches make you do 4 or 5. And that's how we started our week for years, because that's the way guys before me started the week. And then when I was in college, we'd run 20-40s. And then when we got away from Steeler miles, we turned to 20-40. So, this is a progression. I thought we were money ahead by running 20-40s every 30 seconds or every, 20 seconds or whatever. And I was still wrong. But these are things that we traditionally do, like Tony talked about, aerobic versus anaerobic. And if we're training this type of stuff, at what point is that actually going to transfer on the football field? And the reality is it's not, but it's hard because, every football coach wants to prove to everyone that they're outworking everybody. Our team is going to outwork everybody. Well, that's great. If you're working on basketball shit as hard as you possibly can, then it don't matter what's happening on the football field. If you're having a cross-country practice in the middle of your football field, you can work as hard as you want. You're not getting any better to the teams that might be doing things the right way. And so I've got several Vince Anderson quotes here. I was fortunate enough to be in TFC Chicago, and he put plenty of nuggets out there. But I think about this, if you demand explosive movements on running, blocking, tackling, and in the weight room, which we all do, No one goes in there and says, all right, we're going to do 100 squat reps today. Oh, hell no. We're going to put a bunch of weight on there and boom, we're going to move it fast. Then we go outside. Then he says, then you run slow conditioning with poor posture. It sends a mixed message and detrains you. And this is when he was talking about that 14-point turnaround. So if we want to be explosive and fire off the ball and boom, we're moving the football on the D line, none of that is slow. But then we get into conditioning and everything is slow, especially with the guys that we want to be the fastest. We want our linemen to get faster. Forever, my mood in practice was based upon our worst kids, because if our slow-ass linemen were walking, then I got pissed at the whole group. And it didn't matter what our best kids were doing. And so in my opinion, I made our best kids worse because they couldn't perform at the level they needed to be good in football, because they had to perform at whatever conditioning level I was doing. And I was actually making them worse. And I did that for a long time. And most of us don't think of it that way. But if your best kid's finishing a gasser, he's running at sub-max speed. He's training himself to be slower on Friday. But we don't think of it that way, because all we're worried about are those guys at the end and, that are barely making it. And then we're getting pissed at the whole group. But that's what we did for so long. So to steal something from Charlie Francis, this is how he classified running velocity. He had 2 levels, and he did a bunch of tempo work and things like that a lot of Feed the Cats people don't agree with. But when you think of it from a football perspective, your high intensity stuff is your max velocity sprint work. If you start football practice, or like us on Monday, we start with 3 10-yard flies, that's 95% or 100% the best. And because I record, rank, and publish it every week, I have every one of those times for the last 3 years. And I know what's fast and I know what's not fast. All right. Medium intensity is the traditional conditioning. And as Charlie Francis said, it's too slow to be specific. It's too high to recover from for the next practice. And your CNS recovery is limited because of what's going on in your circulatory system. And then you get to the low intensity stuff, the non-sprint day. That's your fundamentals. That's your inside run. When you're doing inside run, that's not max velocity work. Your lineman may not move, 2 feet. And in those situations, you probably have a slow or a quick whistle. We always do in that stuff. And so those are the times that you're working in that low intensity period, that high intensity period. But too many of us want to ride that middle line with traditional conditioning or sprinting to water and sprinting back. And we're always in that medium intensity zone. And has no specificity to the game of football, but we live there, and then we're pissed because our guys aren't explosive and flying around on Friday. So what do? We bring them in on Saturday, we destroy them in film, and we tell them, you better show up on Monday because we're going to work your ass off because we weren't good enough last Friday. And then guess what? The downward spiral continues, and you end up playing worse the next Friday. And next thing you know, you're 2-7, and the coaching staff is bitching that these guys aren't tough anymore, and that, you're looking for other jobs. When it all goes back to the mindset you had in training them, you weren't training them to be better at football. All right. So my problems is I'm not Charlie Francis. So I'm Brad Dixon. How do I know in a gasser that our fitness level is improving? When we run this stuff at the end of practice, am I just visually seeing it? How do I know the dude that's finishing first is actually improving? I don't. I guess I know the guys at the end, because if a guy walked the day before and he's faster the next time, then maybe he improved. Why are we treating our skills and our linemen the same? We have the same conditioning for a 5'11", 180-pound skill who runs a 4.640 that we have for a 6'3", 270-pound lineman. And they all are supposed to finish. Now, we might divide them in 2 groups, but it's still the same test. It's still an aerobic test. And are they actually improving, or are they just trying to get by? In my opinion, our guys just got by, especially our best kids. They could coast and get through it and never get any better. I was a fat, slow lineman, and I hated conditioning. And a lot of my teammates quit because of the conditioning, and players, when they were younger and underdeveloped on my programs, quit when I was an earlier coach. We don't ever take into account what we did for the practice. What's the global effect of all the stressors that we had? School, practice, girlfriend, all these other things, in which we all just want to say kids are soft. But what's the effect? If we were go, every minute was accounted for in practice, and you had a 20-second water break about 3 times during practice, what effect does that have on your conditioning? I mean, they've went hard for 2.5 hours, and then you're going to finish with 15, 20 minutes of conditioning. Well, what do you expect? And then how's that conditioning going to affect tomorrow's practice or Friday's game? If Wednesday is my day, I'm going to kill them. Is that going to affect? If I condition the shit out of them and there's a 48-hour hangover, how's that going to affect Friday's game? Well, we don't think that way. We think that we have to do it in order for them to be tough on Friday night. And then, do I want to waste practice time? I personally don't. And I go back to, if you're losing, we all want to practice harder and do more, but what is the reason we're losing? Is it because we're starting 7 sophomores, 2 juniors, and 1 senior? Because maybe we ran the rest of them off? I don't know. Is it because we can't block and tackle? That has nothing to do with how well they can run a gas or what their conditioning level is. They can't perform. And we'll talk more about that as we go. So what can you do instead? Right? I mean, it's one thing to bitch about everything. It's another thing to have some answers. So coach is going to talk about speed reserve. We can increase our max speed. If I can run 22 miles an hour max speed, I can play at 18 miles an hour really well. And I can use way less energy at 18 miles an hour. Improve your repeat sprint ability, your sprint capacity, which coach will also talk about. You improve doing those things for 5 seconds. You stack that alactic work together so that you improve that ability to do it. You don't sprint, for 50 seconds. You're improving that repeat sprint ability. And then you challenge athletes in practice in situations where they actually have to perform. Then you recover, and then you challenge them again. You don't make practice, one long, grueling, drawn out period. You challenge them for a segment, and then you let them recover, maybe 10 minutes because it was a hard segment. And then you come back and challenge them again. And then I'll give you examples about how we, stack practice this way, and we alternate between high intensity things and lower intensity things and so forth. But that's how you can challenge people to do it. Because if I start, Corfus in his latest article, I think he called it boules instead of joules. If I start with 100 at the beginning of practice, or maybe I only start with 80 because, of other things that have been going on at school, if I'm go, I'm down to like 20 by the end of practice. And then maybe I only recovered to about 60 for the next practice. And if my goal is to be playing lights out on Friday, then I'm nowhere near where I need to be because of what's going on in practice. So what are some things you can do instead? Well, you can auto-regulate flies. So if you're worried about your repeat sprint ability, you can challenge the guys that need to be challenged, but then know when to back off on the guys by knowing, record, ranking, and publish, and know what their fly times are. So if my stud has a 10-yard fly of 0.98, and he goes 0.98, 0.98, 0.99, 104, and then 108, then he's done. If my linemen are 142 normally, let's say they're 119 and they run 136 on their first one, something's wrong. And they don't need to be working out. I mean, something's going on in their system that they don't need to work out, okay? This is something that we've done in the summer and in the early part for those coaches that want to do a little bit more, or their head coach wants them to challenge their guys. Tony talked about, not going 10 seconds. We've found this to be beneficial to compete and have a little bit of fun. Like in track, we went 23-second drill. We'll line up on the goal line and see how far you can go in 10 seconds. Now, we don't do this once we get into the season and things like that, but we do it sometimes on a Thursday if we're giving them Friday, Saturday, Sunday off, or if it's, the end of the first week and you want to challenge the guys a little bit at the end and see where they're at. And then we average those times. And our best guys can get over 90, 95 yards in that. And then you can have, different parameters for your linemen. Maybe your linemen you want your varsity guys to get to 75 yards or something like that. But we're giving them recovery. We're giving them 3 to 4 minutes to recover in order to repeat that again. Vince Anderson had this great idea. Intermittently through practice, if you need to do these things because that's who you are and you need to see your guys working hard, put some intermittent things throughout. So maybe you get through a period and then you finish with 2:30s with, 3 minutes rest. And then you go back to your practice, and you do this intermittently through practice. So maybe you're challenging different segments of practice. Maybe you're challenging your guys, with these right before you get into team defense, where they have to, simulate some of these conditions that they're going to be in later in the game. Or the best thing that we've all seen, and Corfus talked about this in his article, and I think Kier was that rugby strength coach on Twitter. He was at Dallas TFC, and I was able to watch the video, is the tribe test. Kier is a funny guy. He has a less than one rule, right? For every problem that you propose, you better have at least that many solutions. Because if you bring more problems to the table than you do solutions, in other words, the guy in your staff that bitches about everyone in his group and how this kid's weak, this kid's soft, this kid can't read anything, this kid's this, that, but never has any solutions, you got to get rid of that guy. You need to have some solutions to your problems. And so you should always, and so this was his solution. Is a great idea. So what's the tribe test? You start on the goal line. You're going to run for 5 seconds for a maximum distance. But instead of running in a straight line, because in football you have to cut and you take a false read, or, you got to stick your foot in the ground and go the other way and things like that. You run out to 20 yards, then you plant your foot, and then you run back. And you have a partner. And what your partner does is when that horn sounds at 5 seconds, he figures out you're on the 10-yard line, meaning you got 30 yards. And then for them, because they're more of an up-tempo and they figured out they're running plays every 30 seconds, is they rested for 25 seconds. If you're a guy that bleeds the play clock and you're snapping it at the end of 45, then you could increase your rest a little bit. Or if you're trying to go, some of these guys like Rochester, Derek Leonard, who spoke at TFC St. Louis, if you're running to play every 20 seconds, then you might want to crowd that together a little bit more. And so his reasoning behind the 20 yards is even his slowest guys can cover at least 21 yards. But his fast guys can't get to 40. I think his best guy had made it to 34 yards. Because in 5 seconds to sprint 40 yards with a turn and another acceleration, you're teaching acceleration 2 different times. That's fast. And so his best guys were at 34. And then the average drive, like Tony said, is 6 plays. Their largest drive, I think, was 12. And so because their coach wanted to do a little bit more than what their average is, they did 12 reps. You can choose in there how many you want to do. Maybe one day you do 6, and then another time you do 8. And then they alternated between, the first time their right foot touches, the second time their left foot touches. So they're always pivoting different ways. And I thought the best thing that he said was, you got to pick your battles. If the head coach wants something that sucks for the kids, maybe you're an assistant, but you're in charge of conditioning or strength and conditioning. Maybe you need to do 12 reps because that's what makes the coach feel better. You got to figure out where that's at. But talk about a way to train a 5-second football play with a 25 to 30 second recovery, do a set of 6, right? Just like a drive. And then another group goes while you rest for, 4 to 5 minutes, and maybe you repeat it. So maybe that's the time you are on the sideline. Or maybe that's the time after you score and you get to recover because you're not on the kickoff team or things like that. But those are ways that you can condition in a manner that is suitable for the game of football. And it's a great test. And that video, it's 50-some minutes long. That's on the TFC website. If you go to the site with all the videos, and I would recommend it because it's a great one. Tony, anything you want to say about conditioning?
No, one of the cool things about the tribe test is that it kind of looks halfway fun, and challenging, and you're doing it with a partner. There's just a lot of good things about that, and I don't know if there's any type of I don't even like to say the word conditioning, but that to me is more like training than conditioning. Right. When I think of conditioning, I just think of just trying to get as tired as you can be and fight through it.
Yes. And then you can record, rank, and publish. Obviously that's a Coach Holler thing. He and I, he's wrote several articles on it, but I was getting a little more upset than I should have been about everyone bitching about times being posted on Twitter and fly 10s and all that, that everyone was getting away from the real purpose of record, rank, and publish. You know, it's not to be the fastest coach on Twitter. It's to challenge your team and so forth. So you start, you know, measuring record, rank, and publish in this tribe test. You figure out, okay, which lineman can go both ways. Well, Billy, my best lineman right here, I think's my best lineman. He's about 10th on this list. So at some point he's going to tire out in the game, and he's not my best lineman anymore. So when we get, you know, through this and we start talking about substitutions, you start thinking a little bit about who actually can do it. This year we had a lineman go both ways. First one we've had in 2 years. Why? Because that dude he was like a 5'1", 740, but damn it, he was a 5'1", 740 on play 1. And I bet if we measure his 40 on play 6, he's a 5'1", 7 guy. He never was super fast, but man, his ability to stack that anaerobic work together was unbelievable. And we never saw on the field a difference in his play based upon first quarter, third quarter, whatever. Because that's who he was. Now, our 370-pound all-state, should have been all-state nose tackle that's playing Division II, he played defense because he was really good for 2 or 3 plays, and then he needed a break. But damn it, he was 370 and strong, and everybody had to double team him. If I would have asked him to play offensive tackle, he would have been very average at everything, okay?